some deer know when there is just a person in there recreationally and someone in there to kill them. They know when something is after them.
Predator prey mentality.
Yeah.
Like they feel like they're being stalked.
I do think there's a difference. And I think that there is an amount of pressure you can apply to one hunting them, truly hunting them, and then knowing they're being hunted before they will make a move. And I got to see it firsthand. The buck I'd been after for 2 years was being hunted by another guy who he pressured him hard. He got in there. I was sitting back in a tree watching. He got within 100 yards of the deer on the ground, and the wind changed. All the deer got blown out of that big CRP patch, and he didn't come back. I'm sure there'd been duck hunters in there in the mornings and stuff like that, shooting their guns loud, talking, everything else. He has never cared once about that. That deer didn't care one time.
So you saw it firsthand on
I got to watch it happen. Yeah. But the guy that was sneaking around in there and they didn't know he was there and all of a sudden they caught his wind, they did not like that.
Ready to have some fun?
I'm Hunter Hogan and welcome to Painting Public.
Let's do it.
Oh my God. Dude, this deer's a giant.
What's up, guys, and welcome back to Painting Public, brought to you by Trophyline. Super excited for our topic today. Our topic today is going to talk about hunting pressure. A few different things when it comes to hunting pressure, especially end of October, beginning of November. A lot of people are coming and hunting in the Midwest. A lot of people are taking a rutcation, whether they're staying home or traveling state to state. There is the highest number of public land hunters that time of year. So we're going to talk with Austin Culbertson, Jeff Raney, and Dylan Herriman on two different things when it comes to hunting pressure. One, how to effectively kill a mature buck when there's many people hunting a property, if you know that there's one there. And two, when to know when to move properties or what properties to look for. And that is very determined on what state you're in, how much pressure a property can handle, when it's time to move, when it's time to stay. It's a tough time of year to really determine those decisions and stay fluent in your tactics and motives of killing a big mature whitetail buck. So we're going to talk with our guests. We're going to see what tactics they do to stay effective this time of year and deal with the hunting pressure. All right, now we're going to talk about hunting pressure. So dealing with hunting pressure, just person to person, and then dealing with other people's hunting pressure on a buck that you know about, and then gauging how much pressure from you that a buck can handle.
Right.
So let's talk about that. We're kind of, transitioning into like more in the pre-rut type stuff, leaving that, I don't know what to call it after your last podcast with October lull. It's kind of your favorite, so it's not really a lull.
Yeah.
But early October, we'll call it that. Early October going into like pre-rut and then like end of October type of deal. We're talking when most people are going to start hunting.
Right.
When you're going to start seeing a lot of pressure on public land, when bucks maybe start getting pushed off of properties. What's your first line of defense when it comes to that time of year? And, I've seen you start fresh on properties before and staying mobile and stuff, but what's kind of your first line of defense when it comes to a lot of people starting to hunt?
Hopefully my knowledge of the deer is probably, what I've done before that day is a lot of what I think can help you for the rest of the year. Not that, like we said, they're an animal that has a brain of their own and everything. And they will make changes, but with some of these deer, you can better predict what they're going to do based on what you've seen them do in the past.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of pressure before the woods gets crazy that can teach you some of that. So in the earlier season, on these public ground that we have in Missouri, probably anywhere, we've got hikers, bikers, fishermen, dove hunters, duck hunters, squirrel hunters, rabbit hunters with dogs, photographers, you name it, right?
Yeah.
Some of these deer live and grow up around that, and some of them they all are. They're not going to just stand there and let you pet them.
Yeah.
But they definitely have adjusted to it.
They have a tolerance.
They have a tolerance. And there's certain things that you can watch deer do, specific deer do, to avoid people or where they end up running to when they do get pushed out, whether it's by a hunter or by a hiker or whoever it might be. Getting to watch a deer do some of that can save you a lot of heartache.
Yeah.
Because you get to find out once the pressure gets there where that buck's comfortable.
If I get to see a buck get busted, I feel like there's 0% chance I can't kill him.
Yeah, right.
I'm like so excited if I see my target buck get busted and it's not by me and I get to watch what he does.
Yeah, well, 2 days later when he's back in his home core area, if you can't kill him there, you could go and bust him. Push him to his little secondary area that he feels safe in. If it's a more, or you get a better advantage of that area, and you might be able to kill him.
So we'll jump into that too. I think that obviously it's a popular tactic too on the bump and dump, right? Purposely bumping a buck out of his bedding area or the place that you're going to hunt him, killing him either when he comes back there or in a secondary area. But how much do you think an old public land buck is going to put up with that? I mean, is there a certain number of times that you can get away with that? Is it deer to deer basis? What's your thoughts on that tolerance level of, okay, he's on public land, he puts up with this all the time, versus, okay, he's going to leave?
I've heard people try to put a number to it, and I don't think there is one that you could even come close to putting a number to for every deer.
Yeah.
Because they are all so different, and their circumstances are different.
Right.
If they're on a place where guys can dove hunt and duck hunt, and they've got shotguns going over their head every day, and they've lived through that, and that's just their natural everyday to-day thing that happens, they can take a lot of pressure. They can take people being in there all the time.
Right.
It's honestly, and it depends on the situation as far as like what their bedding looks like too. Like if they were in open woods bedding on a point and you go in there and run them out 3 days in a row, they're probably not going to be back.
Yeah, it's not.
But in a massive area where they've got a thicket where they can just be safe and 10 yards away, I think that a deer like that will never leave.
So it's really about gauging how far or how far they have to go, or what exactly they have to do to feel safe again.
I suppose, yeah. I
Trying
think
to gauge to that.
Yeah, it's one way to gauge it. I also think they know, at least some deer know, when there is just a person in there recreationally and someone in there to kill them.
How do you think so?
Well,
based on your experience.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. You go walking down a trail with a dog, or you and your wife are holding hands walking down a old gravel road, and those deer just watch you. They'll just sit there, they'll watch you go back to eating. They might move off 50 yards, something like that. You go sneaking around and you stop and you're trying to be creeping around the woods, and they hear his twig break and they see you in there, they go bolting off. Yeah. Right? It's just totally different. They know when something is after them.
Predator prey mentality.
Yeah.
Like they feel like they're being stalked.
I mean, these days, we are their apex predator.
Yeah.
And we're not always after them. Not everybody's after them, but they know, in order for them to survive, they better know at least when someone's after them.
Yeah.
So I do think there's a difference. And I think that there is an amount of pressure you can apply to one hunting them, truly hunting them, and then knowing they're being hunted before they will make a move. And I got to see it firsthand. The buck I'd been after for 2 years was being hunted by another guy who he pressured him hard. He got in there. I was sitting back in a tree watching, and he got within 100 yards of the deer on the ground, and the wind changed, and all the deer got blown out of that big CRP patch, and he didn't come back. I'm sure there'd been duck hunters in there in the mornings and stuff like that, shooting their guns loud, talking, everything else. He has never cared once about that. That deer didn't care one time.
So you saw it firsthand on like.
I got to watch it happen.
Yeah.
But the guy that was sneaking around in there and they didn't know he was there and all of a sudden they caught his wind, they did not like that.
Wow.
That was completely different, right?
Yeah.
It's different than Joe Blow and his buddies, smoking and joking with their, and their shotguns and stuff like that. And then you got a guy who is sneaking and in camo and completely quiet. And, like I said, then they catch your wind or something, or they catch movement. That makes them freak.
Right.
And that deer moved almost 1,000 yards from his bedding area to a new area.
Yeah.
The next day.
Yeah.
After that, he was not. I was looking for him for 2 whole days. I watched him morning and night trying to find him again. After that, couldn't find him. And it just so happens that I was sitting there on the 3rd morning looking for him. And I turn around, I look like 1,000 yards down this down this cornfield that had been cut. And I saw a big deer. We've talked about this a little bit, but I saw a big deer at the end of it.
Yeah.
And he walked into a different bedding area.
Mm.
And it was him.
Yeah.
And he had never bedded him. I watched this deer for years.
That was the end of his tolerance level.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
So I believe that deer knew he was being hunted at that point, and he decided to leave.
Yeah.
So hunting tolerance, I think, is a bit different than just like pressure from,
whatever.
Yeah, from everything else.
Deer hunting pressure is a little bit different.
Yep.
So how about, hunting around pressure when it comes person to person? I know you've had some success on public in the rut, in the Midwest. That is one of the hardest things I've ever tried to do before is hunting the Midwest in the first 2 weeks of November, when everybody comes up or down to hunt, right? You've got 8 trucks per parking lot. You've got people all over a property. I mean, how were you able to get a buck killed dealing around that kind of pressure? We'll get into rut hunting tactics later, but just specifically escaping the people and finding the deer. You don't have to tell your secrets, but
I think one thing to try to do is try to go places people can't, and I know that's very vague. Whether that means going further than people, or it means going harder. Let's say there's big obstacles in the way or something like that. Like that's a very simple way to do it, and I think that's kind of I've always kind of like been somebody that was like, well, I'll just go further in. That's not always the case,
right?
But it's at least a starting block,
right? It's
somewhere I look to, like, okay, if there's somewhere kind of hard to get to, if I go there, I at least probably alleviate 75% of the guys. Now, 25% of the guys that do go back there, they're probably the better hunters. So it does, that is kind of the hard part there.
Am I better or worse?
Yeah. Is it? Yeah. Am I actually doing myself a favor or not? I don't know. But that's always been something I've at least started by doing, is trying to get to places where others won't. And that, like I said, that's very vague because there's plenty of ways to do that, I think. But even, let's say there is a lot of people, man, I think at that point, you're just having to make sure, well, first of all, I'm still going to try to find bedding. I mean, I know that's not necessarily the case. If I can find bedding close to somewhere where I can have a natural travel corridor, I don't necessarily need a rut funnel, but just somewhere where deer naturally want to travel in and out of a bedding area, never a bad idea. Now, do we want to get deep into like where and why right now, or is that?
No, just mainly combating against people pressure and dealing with that many people. And I mean, obviously, what you're saying is like get to the places that maybe not the deepest spot, but the hardest to get to spot.
Yeah.
And that probably requires like a more difficult property to hunt.
In some cases, that's what I mean. It's not always just like the farthest walk or something like that. There's just different barriers to entry that might cause a property to be hunted less.
Right. Yeah. Maybe not your classic crop fields with open oak flats.
Right.
You might have to get in the brush a little bit.
Yeah.
Get into some briars, autumn olive, open country, whatever it is. Doing things that other people won't, because the deer will be where the people are not.
Yeah.
And whether that's a tiny little overlooked spot or whether that's the hardest to get to spot.
I think just sitting in an open spot, just being like, well, it's the rut, anything can happen. Sure, it can.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to put things in my favor.
Yeah.
And
still scouting, killing.
Yeah.
Not just hunting.
A little bit. Yeah. Yeah. There's at least some of that goes into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely have some different tactics that I use that not necessarily a rut hunting podcast here today, or episode, but yeah, some different things I that make my decisions for me, really. But as far as pressure, I mean, yeah, that's basically it. I mean, there's not a lot you can do, I don't think, in some scenarios. Kind of have to get in and join.
Stay mobile.
Yeah, stay mobile.
Maybe if a spot gets pounded out, maybe it was great yesterday and gets pounded out today, you may have to start over.
Yeah.
Which can be frustrating.
Or fun.
Going into, obviously, end of October, beginning of November, kind of when everybody takes their rutcation.
Yeah.
And, we're starting to deal with a lot less of the early season and, honing in on deer and more of the, deer traveling around, and there's a lot of people to deal with. So kind of give me your thoughts on, are there certain states that you like to target at that time? Do you do it depending on states or depending on properties or dependent on specific deer? Kind of how do you manage that type of time frame or time of year,
So for me, I always have a couple tags that I plan on during the rut. Kansas, a lot of times, is one of them because it's my home state. This year it's going to be Nebraska as well. May get into Kentucky, Illinois, or something like that, Oklahoma or something, depending on how these tags go this year. I don't do anything by state. It's more of I search for certain things. A lot of people hunt big properties. Seen it in Missouri a lot, especially in the rut. I think I've told you I counted on a piece of property last year. I counted 33 trucks on a 4,000-acre piece. So what I do actually a lot of times when I'm on my Onyx or scouting for the rut, I'm looking for little properties. Hopefully it doesn't stack a million people on them now, but I actually look for little properties. I'll look for, depending. Now in Nebraska this year where we're hunting, I'm not targeting a small property, but that's because of the resources on the bigger property. It's just got way better resources. So, you got to take it with a grain of salt, and depending on the situation. But I think a lot of people overlook little properties. I've had a lot of success on Kansas, especially hitting small little parcels of public land, mostly walk-in hunting, stuff like that. We've got stuff called iWeedhaul now as well that you can check in, and they only allow I think 2 people on at a time, or 1 person on at a time. Do what?
Per day.
Yeah, per day.
Huh.
So if you check in, you get on that property, I think you're the only one on it, which is pretty neat. So I think instead of targeting large properties, a lot of times I think it'd be beneficial for guys to look for small properties that have a great funnel point or travel corridor this time of year on that property, not necessarily holding deer. But what I look for around those smaller properties is properties that hold deer. Because now they're using that smaller property to travel from property to property.
Right, and you're looking for that type of stuff specifically this time of year because the deer are doing the moving.
Yeah, so we're getting into the last week of October here. I would say, deer are starting to move around. It's more at night. The bucks, if they're moving properties, it's more at night right now. But you're talking about here in another week and a half, you could have early does coming to estrus, start pulling bucks from all over the place. Bucks are going to start traveling during the daytime finally. Actually traveling, not moving 100 yards out of their bedding or something like that in the food source. But they're going to start moving and traveling greater distances during daylight. And they want to feel hidden. But they also want to be able to see. That's another thing. We hunt these early season bucks. We hunt them in tall stuff, right? They can't see anything.
Right.
They don't want to be seen. They don't care if they can see anything.
Right.
bucks want to see now.
Mm-hmm.
So them little timber pocket or little timber creek bottoms and stuff like that now provide cover, and they can get visual of the other deer as they're moving through areas. Not only are they scent checking, but they're looking for deer. They're checking out the competition between bucks. They're looking for does to check does. They're trying to get a good feel for what deer are in the area. Because that's, deer have a hierarchy just like anybody else, any other animal. So they're trying to assert their dominance or figure out the hierarchy in a certain area between bucks. So now they're going to start moving here about another week. They're going to start moving in daylight more.
Yeah.
They'll travel into midday,
Mm-hmm.
even as early as the first week of November here.
Right.
Now, if you have hot spells, most time they'll move hour, 2 hours, maybe in the morning. They're going to bed down. But they may get itching to get up middle of the day too. I'm more focused on travel points. I'm more focused on properties around the public property that I can hunt. For me, like I want to see really good properties surrounding. If you see a property that has a little creek bottom on it or something, but it's the only place that has any good cover or has the good stuff is the property you're on, you're probably going to hold a few deer, but I'm not looking for a property necessarily to hold the giant right now.
Right.
I'm looking for a property that I can have a giant moving into. Because most likely at this point in the public season, it's been hunted, especially in Kansas. Maybe those big bucks have already been pushed off of there, but new bucks are coming in.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for more bucks on their feet and traveling.
It makes sense because the other part of this podcast we were talking about, how much pressure can a property handle, but how much pressure can a deer handle?
Yeah.
And so, like, if you're looking for those smaller properties that are surrounded by properties that hold deer, maybe that big public piece have all the deer pushed out of it now because it has a lot of pressure in there and they're all pushed out into surrounding properties. But if you get that tiny property with, good private or maybe land that doesn't get hunted as hard as public around it, like that's what's going to hold the deer, and then you're just in an area that they're going to travel through. So they never get like over pressured because of that public land.
Well, one thing too people forget, it's hard to push all the does out of property.
Yeah.
It really is.
Right.
I mean, for some reason, I have no idea. It's still
we're getting closer to
confuses
does.
me this day, but does don't do what bucks do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some older does do, but for the most part, does don't do what bucks do. Does can handle way more pressure.
Right.
So if you can find a property that maybe bucks have had enough, they've got another place to go. They don't have to be walked in on by hunters every day or pushed around, and they leave.
Right.
Does will handle more of that.
Right.
So some of these bigger properties too, like they'll hold the does, and if they hold does, bucks will come back, pressure or not.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're going to move around pressure, which is a whole nother topic.
Right. Yeah.
And move around people based off of their knowledge of the property and experience with people on the property. Because I mean, the one thing we do as hunters is honestly we're too repeatable at times.
Yeah, and one of our jobs as public land hunters is to pattern the other people.
Yeah. I mean, you're patterning other people who.
If you got a guy that's going into the same spot every day, and you notice that you drive by him in the parking lot and he's going into the same lot every day or every weekend or however often he hunts, what we know from that is big bucks are going to pattern him.
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's probably if I give the best advice to people is quit taking the same route into the same stand every day.
Yeah.
Over and over
Simply
and over.
being mobile, even if it's just throwing a dart on a dartboard on the map, just being in a different tree every day gives you a huge advantage over a buck.
And different access, and this is a private land thing more than public land thing. I not necessarily, in a way it is, but like I am so particular about my access on private land. So particular. You cannot have a buck that you're trying to kill on private land pattern you coming into your stand. You just can't have it.
Right.
You won't kill him.
with that.
Yeah.
You will not kill that deer. If that deer knows you're coming in a certain way, he may be there. He may be staying there. If he thinks he's got you figured out, you ain't killing him. He's not walking in front of you.
Yeah, and a lot of times when you're like getting a buck on camera, and then you go in to hunt and he doesn't show up, and you're like, that's happened to me 5 times. He's tracking you going in.
When I was younger in Northwest Kansas, had great property down there. And I had a hard time killing big bucks. This is back when I didn't know nothing. I was just learning. And let me tell you right now, I always had a big buck on camera. And I promise you, he disappeared off camera the first day I hunted every year. Because I did not pay attention enough to my access. I always took the same route into every single one of my stands and never changed it up. I was patternable. And that's what we don't realize a lot of times is we're patternable to these deer, especially mature bucks. Mature bucks know the gig. Like they've been around, they've seen it. They're not trying to walk in front of your stand.
Right.
You know, they're not trying to be near you.
Right.
So, and let me tell you this, big bucks too, if you don't have great access, they know you're there.
Yeah.
They
set themselves up to track you go in on access.
They do. Big bucks pattern you so much, and I don't think people realize how much it happens. And they know their area way better than we know it. And they set themselves up to where they know you're coming. You don't even know you spooked a deer.
I think that's why I resort to a scouting set so much and why I enjoy observation sets so much, because I'm taking myself out of the area and watching what happens naturally, watching how that buck sets himself up, how he moves through the day, how he moves out of his bed and wind checks certain areas. And it allows me to pinpoint where I can and can't be and where I can and can't go in, especially on public.
Do that, and that's a killer way to get on big bucks, because now it's just like if you were to break into a bank, you're not going to walk right in front of the security guard if you can avoid it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not telling anyone to break into a bank here, but I mean, you're making an elaborate plan to find the weak point. Find the area without the security camera. You know, that's the same with a buck, is he's going to have something he's overlooking that you can get in on him.
Yeah.
You're going to have a route to most bucks. Now, some timber bucks are about unkillable with just timber.
Right.
And the way that they set themselves up with thermals and wind directions and the terrain.
And a bump and dump's a story for another day, but
yeah, bump and dump's a whole nother deal. But you know, that's just the thing is, I mean, you just have to have great access. You have to change up your access. You have to figure out, you have to scout. You have to put eyes on deer. You know, when I killed the Missouri deer this year, I watched him. I really barely got into that patch that I was hunting, and I killed him, found him, figured out where he was bedded, what he was doing. We ended up getting the right wind, knew we could get in close. We got in close, we killed him.
Yeah.
You know, so, and that was a game plan that came together between all three of us talking about how to get in on him, you know, between what trees were available to get into.
We rerouted the whole access. When we sat down and planned it, we were like, oh, wait, what about this?
Yeah, because I had a different plan. And, you know, it could have worked, but it wasn't the best way to do it.
Yeah, it was less invasive the way you ended up.
It was way less.
And come to find out, he's bedded how far from you?
He was bedded 35 yards from us.
35 yards from the tree you two climbed into.
Yeah.
So, good thing you took the access you did.
Yeah. It ended up being absolutely perfect. But that was one of those things where, you know, that's the thing too, if you can get a couple guys together that you know are good hunters or you can learn from or you can bounce ideas off of, 9 times out of 10, you're going to come up with a more solid plan than coming up just by yourself.
Yeah. Teamwork is really key to like high efficiency whenever it comes.
I think as deer hunters, we try to go on this loner route a lot of times. A lot of guys, you don't want anyone, but if you can find a core group of good hunters that you trust and that's
the hard part.
Yeah, that's the hard part. But if you can, you'll kill more deer.
Yeah. I've
killed more deer, period, because of knowing you guys and being around other good hunters that I could trust than I would have killed by myself, period. That's just it's not even a question.
Right.
And it's just a teamwork aspect and bouncing ideas and learning from each other, because this is the thing. As hunters too, we all got to stop acting like we have it all figured out.
Yeah.
You can learn so much from another good hunter, and he'll show you things that you never thought about doing, and you'll show him things he never thought about doing. And we all have our specialties. You know, you're an early season guy. I mean, I hate to call you that. I mean, obviously,
I love early season.
Yeah, so you're an early season guy. I grew up being a rut guy. You know, I treat the rut. A lot of people think is random, but I break it down into a science.
Yeah.
Is how I hunt it.
Yeah.
You know, based off of percentages of what deer are going to be doing on what days of rut.
Right.
You know, it's a whole thing for me.
Right.
And that's more of my thing. But, you know, becoming friends with you and Dylan and Austin and Jace and these early season guys.
Yeah.
Now I've got a whole nother set of tools in my bag.
Yeah.
And I've killed a bunch of deer because of it.
You have a whole nother season.
Yeah,
Honestly.
a whole nother season. You know, I'm not just limited to the last week of October and November and early
When
December.
the deer are moving, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
you're learning how deer handle pressure and what it does to them.
yeah, and to be honest with you, you know, deer are so killable early at times.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the thing is like we think of deer once they get on their feet and start moving a lot as killable. That's some of the hardest times to kill your target buck.
It is, yeah.
I mean, once he starts getting does on his mind, it could get him killed
Mm-hmm.
or it could save him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because it can move him completely away from you.
Right.
You know, and change what he's doing, or he could go 2 miles away.
Right.
You know, he could have a completely different area he goes during rut than where he's at in early season where he's killable.
Right.
He may be on a completely different property you can't even get on.
Right.
So it just brings in, I mean, you could fill more tags.
Yeah.
If you're versatile from September to December, you're going to fill more tags.
Yeah, absolutely. And the pressure is different for each one of those phases of the season.
Yep. You know, like here in Kansas, we don't get quite the early season pressure. We're a rut state.
Yeah.
Everyone takes off the first 2 weeks in November of work.
Yeah.
I mean, every property's packed.
Well, and it's that way in a lot of states too.
It is. But what people don't realize is we don't get that busy early here.
Yeah.
You know, that's really nice.
Yeah.
Because you go to some of these early season states, like what we deal with in Missouri,
Mm-hmm.
or if you go to like Kentucky,
Yeah.
or you go to Illinois even,
Mm-hmm.
you're dealing with more early season pressure
Oh yeah.
than what I deal with here in Kansas.
Right.
You know, so it's state to state, but it's also time of year dependent too.
Yeah, for sure. So you obviously come from Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
Big time pressure state.
Yeah.
And I feel like most of your hunting experience period has been high pressure states, whether that's Oklahoma, our time in Illinois has been crazy pressure.
Yes.
Missouri's high pressure, Nebraska's high pressure. Like a lot of the states you have experience in are high pressure. And I've noticed when you get the time to hunt, what was it? Last year before you killed your booner, you hunted like 5 properties? 6 different properties. And like every hunt was somewhere different.
Mm-hmm.
So like how do you plan for that? Do you place yourself in like your highest percentage area? Like I guess my question is, how do you prepare your mind? How do you prepare your map studies? How do you prepare over the summer for dealing with the kind of pressure that you deal with both from people and from hogs?
Well, like in Missouri, I mean, I obviously have y'all guys to go off of because y'all are in that area and it's a good source to go. So I'm asking about these properties and seeing which is overpressured, which is not, and all that. And I'm going in there and map studying that property as I'm hunting it. And if I don't see something I like, I'm going to bounce around and find something else. And that's what I did to get on that deer pretty quick.
Yeah. So in Oklahoma, like in your home state where you're able to prep over the summer and stuff, like you're dealing with, I know pressure is a very generalized word, but like everybody's feeding corn.
Yes.
So that provides like an opposite of pressure, like an attraction away from properties maybe that you can hunt. Like you've got hogs that you're dealing with on pressure. You've got a lot of hunting pressure. What do you try to do over the summer or like in the early season to help prepare yourself for like dealing with these high pressure deer? And what do you see different maybe in that state than a lot of other states as far as trying to get one killed?
So the hog problem is unbelievable. It's there, you really can't work around it at all. But most of your deer, they're going to. I'm trying to figure out how to answer that.
Mm-hmm. Like once you say you find a buck, right?
Yeah.
Because like that's step one is finding a buck. How do you prepare yourself for like, you're like, okay, I found a buck, but he's not just going to be there. It's not like early season Kansas where it's like, okay, he's not going to get bothered. He's going to get bothered.
Mm-hmm. And he's moving.
And he's going to be moving from people, from hogs, from bait sites. What do you do to try to stay on that deer once he disappears? Like my first thought would be like scout to escape areas.
Well, you don't always have those. What I'm hunting is like,
I think that's when you just have to, in my opinion, I don't want to speak necessarily on what he does, but what comes to mind for me is you just basically have to get in there, have the right wind and hunt.
yeah.
I mean, because you can't control the hogs.
Time in the stand.
Yeah, time in the stand. You can't control the hogs.
Mm-hmm.
You can only control what you control. So, I mean, I'm sure this is what you do. You know, when you have the right wind and you know he's in there in that area, you just go hunting. You can't control whether the hogs have pushed him out or another factor has pushed the deer.
More of a time game.
It's more of a time game. I don't think it's a deer that you can be like, oh, he's here. He's not getting bothered. I go kill him this day.
Right.
You know, it's more of, well, I'm going to have to put sit in a tree.
Right.
That's kind of what I would think of.
Well, and that's where, like you were explaining, the deer we killed in Oklahoma, it's the first buck I've ever killed that I had game camera pictures of before.
Yeah, and that's another thing.
But we hadn't had pictures of him for over a month.
Yeah. That you can run cameras in Oklahoma on public land,
Mm-hmm.
which helps, but you can't always go off of your camera sources and that sort of stuff. But that deer was bedding, I don't know, I had 3 cameras around him.
Yeah, we were in range of one of the cameras. We were in bow range of one of the cameras that we had not got pictures of him. And it was set in a great spot.
It's just, I don't know. You can't go off cameras, and finding their secondary bedding isn't always easy because they get pushed from pressure. You got pigs, you got people, and just like Jeff said, you got to go in there and hunt on the right wind.
Yeah. Get your wind right and put time in the stand, because that makes sense, because like I've heard so many people, especially this time of year, they're like, well, I'm just sitting around waiting on this one to daylight on their camera. And it's like, well, maybe in like an unpressured state, right? Like in a perfect world of private Iowa or private Kansas, or like areas where there isn't surrounding pressure. But anywhere that there's high pressure, you can't be just like waiting on them to show up on your game camera at the right time.
Cameras are the most overused, wrongly utilized, and relied on piece of equipment that is honestly extremely beneficial to us.
Yeah.
Cameras are extremely beneficial, but they're used wrong 90% of the time.
Yeah.
They're trusted too much 90% of the time.
Right.
People get to a point
they don't hunt because of
they get obsessed with their cameras and what's on camera. I literally just had a conversation. I'm not even kidding you. I literally just had a conversation with a buddy today about a buck that just showed up, and he'd been gone for a month. And he was like, well, I don't know if I'll be able to get him killed because he hadn't been on camera much. I said, dude, it's last week of October. He just showed up. He's there.
Yeah.
I'm like, who cares if he's on camera?
Yeah.
We just bumped a booner going in and working on property here at the house yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have pictures of that deer on a game camera.
Right.
I summer scouted him.
Mm-hmm.
I knew where he was at, and I knew once the crops were cut on his side, he was going to come into my stuff, and he did.
Right.
That's another thing too. We got to rely more on other work than just letting cameras do the work for us. You got to rely on your instincts as a hunter. If you spend enough time scouting bucks like you do, you learn what they like to do. You kind of get a idea of what bucks during certain times of the year are going to do, where they're going to go, what they're looking for, because every buck has a different personality. So you can't just rely on game. I've said this before, and don't get me wrong. This year I've kind of hated not having cameras on public land in Kansas because you can't have them anymore. Just because I didn't get to do early season scouting, and the property I hunt early season in Kansas is just unfathomable. Cover. It's stuff you can't hunt in.
Mm-hmm.
It's stuff you can't see in.
Mm-hmm.
And big deer don't have to move out of it. So if you don't have one located already before he's in there before it gets to hunting season and he's not moving much out of it, it's really tough without cameras or locate.
You got to put time in the stand.
You got to put time in the stand. And a lot of times you can burn a lot of time in the stand. I burnt quite a bit early season in Kansas this year. And I'll be honest, I ain't had a single big deer in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
But that honestly came down to me not summer scouting.
Mm-hmm.
Had I summer scouted and had bucks found, I think it'd been a completely different story.
Right. It's really about preparation. It's like you have bucks found in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
It's like finding those bucks that you want to kill, and then in your instance with the high pressure situation, it's just putting time in on it.
Yeah.
It's almost like a rut season application to any time of the year, is because like rut, they're moving around because of rut activity, but early season, say in Oklahoma where there's a lot of people hunting, a lot of hogs pushing them around and stuff, the deer are moving around from the pressure. So it's like you got to just put time in for whenever he does show up, you need to be there to kill him, not just waiting on your camera to get a picture and then you go in the next day and you might be gone.
Yeah. I also think like early season and summer scouting there is, I wouldn't say it's more difficult, but I'd say it's more of a challenge because we have 0 crops.
Yeah.
Around where I'm hunting. I mean, we have CRP patches and timber.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
So you rely on cameras and old school hunting tactics.
Yeah.
You know, ground sign, map studies, terrain, and
pressured versus unpressured
pressure versus unpressured pieces. So I mean, that's the thing too. You know, like you just can't have cameras in your bag. Like you just can't only rely on cameras. Period. And that's there's times where I wish I wouldn't have cameras.
Yeah.
Because I found myself here a couple of years ago getting, you know, too locked into my cameras and what's on camera and what's not on camera. And I don't know how many times I've watched bucks skirt cameras.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't always.
That's a wild concept.
They don't.
But it's so true.
I had a camera in Oklahoma last year on private ground, and the camera went off at night, and legitimately that buck bolted.
Yeah.
He bolted.
And
I had it on video, and the only reason I know that is I had it on video mode. And I will say this, if you utilize cameras and you can put them on video mode, you will find out a whole lot more. I don't know how many times last year on Kansas when I was hunting a giant that I got a little buck on camera, hit my picture first, set the camera off, and then if I wouldn't have had it on video mode, here he comes strolling behind me. Would have never seen him on camera.
Making me second guess all my cameras right now.
Happens all the time.
If I have areas with good, if I'm running cell cams, I have areas with good service, so my battery's not going to get super drained, or if you can even run solar panels on your cameras, video mode in an area where they're not going to get set off constantly.
Right.
Like in certain areas, video mode is a game changer. It shows you miss so much by having a camera on.
That's what I did in Oklahoma before I left and headed here. So that 8-point that I'm hunting, when you sent that picture, he was on the bottom of the property. He crossed from the bottom of the property, but it come from my house, which is quite a ways away. He cut across that, and I didn't get a picture of him. He was with a little buck or something, and I guess he made his way all the way to the top of that hill, and then we got a picture right there of him.
Yeah.
But I never had a picture of him over there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're traveling quite a bit right now, and it's hard hunting them down there, especially when they're doing that in timber and just.
I don't know how many buddies I've had text me over the last 5 days. I got more bucks on camera.
Yeah.
I got more bucks on camera. I got new bucks on camera. he finally showed up.
It's that time.
I mean, it's that time. I mean, the big deal right now, and this is kind of where I go to this time of year, is I just go sit in a tree. I mean, if you have time to be in a tree, get in a tree. In a good spot. You know, you could have preseason scouting, have all this stuff. Work terrain and sit in a tree.
Yeah.
Work your wind direction, work your terrain features, and get in a tree. You can't kill them if you ain't there. And waiting on, trail camera pictures from your house ain't killing them.
Right.
You got to be in a tree to kill deer. But I'm not saying to, abandon or go hunt horrible winds and hunt recklessly.
Right.
Private land, public land, obviously public land, we're all very aggressive. I mean, I bounce around everywhere on public land.
Right.
And I get right into stuff. I could care
because of the high pressure system.
Yeah, I could care less if I'm trying to set up a stand and there's a 180-inch deer 30 yards from me.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know that. I don't know where he's at, but I'm going to go get in where he might be.
Right.
I should have shot that buck in Missouri last year, but I set up a stand. I walked straight into the bedding, stuff over my head, got in a tree, and 30 minutes later, there's a buck stands up. He's a 160-inch deer, 30 yards from me, from the tree.
That's crazy.
And I don't want to get into why I didn't shoot that deer because I'm pretty mad about that. But let's just say I was trying to film and had him at 16 yards. Didn't get the camera on him in frame. Chose not to shoot him, and didn't get a second chance. So that was.
So high pressure deer, small properties, time in the stand, high aggression.
Oh yeah.
So that's our 3 things out of that.
Yeah, I mean bouncing around. I rarely sit in the same same tree more than 2 sits.
Yeah.
If I don't see if I've got a rut funnel, and I just know like these set of days here,
right.
And this thing too, you go hunt that with a bad wind.
Right.
A lot of people don't talk about that. I'm not telling everyone. I wish people would hunt proper winds more often. But I'm telling you, if there's one time where you're like, oh, I don't got a good wind to hunt this stand, but it's a funnel. It is a point where bucks, I've had 17 bucks in one day in Kansas on the right funnel point walk by my stand in one day.
Let's get into our rut podcast.
Okay.